Good afternoon and happy Southern HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. My name is Daphina Ward and I serve as Executive Director of the Southern AIDS Coalition. Thank you for taking the time to join us today for this amazing conversation. I think you will find that it will be tremendously informative and inspiring. So we appreciate you taking the time to join us. Today's theme for Southern HIV/AIDS Awareness Day, or SHAD, 2021 is support, act, change. And we know that this is a cycle of behaviors and things that have to happen in order for us to effectively address the HIV epidemic in the South. Today's conversation is going to be around sustaining emerging Southern leadership. What needs to happen in our communities in order to sustain organizations that are community-led, community-focused, and community-driven? So we don't want organizations to fold because they don't have adequate support. So we'll be talking about some of the strategies that we're seeing happen in our communities. We'll share a story from Mississippi of how one strong and resilient organization did amazing work to support an up-and-coming organization in that community. We'll hear from funders who are funding work on the ground in Southern states who are committed to supporting emerging grassroots organizations. And we'll hear from organizations themselves who are doing this work in response to a community need that came to their attention. And so we're really glad that we could have this conversation with you. And so we hope that you'll sit back, take all of this in, and be inspired by the amazing work of emerging organizations here in the Southern United States. And so our conversation will begin with Kathy Garner and Cedric Sturdivant of Mississippi.
Hi, Daphina.
Hello.
Hey, y'all. How are you?
Great.
Doing great.
Thank you so much for having us on.
So glad to have you. And I know I've talked with both of you in the past about the work of your organizations. And I think that your relationship is a beautiful case study in what we can do in the region to support emerging leadership. So I'd love to start with Cedric, if that's okay. Talk a little bit, share a little bit about your background, Cedric, and how you came to do this work.
Okay. I'm Cedric Sturdivant. The way I became to doing this work was that HIV infected my life. I was diagnosed with HIV in 2005. I ignored it. And in 2006, I had an AIDS diagnosis, which I spent some time in a hospital and almost died. And I had to move back to Mississippi. And that's where it got started. At the clinic that I was going to, I started doing some advocacy work and learning more about HIV. And in the same sense, I was learning that there was people living with HIV who were ashamed and also afraid because this was like in 2006. So things were a little bit different. And HIV discrimination was kind of like, just crazy at that time. And I later got a job with my brother's keeper in Jackson, Mississippi. And I just noticed that throughout working there, I just noticed that here in the Delta, where I'm originally from, that there was the work wasn't being done here. And I think mainly because funding wasn't being released to rural areas as much now as it is now as it was then. So that's how I got started. And I wanted to make sure that my people, all throughout Mississippi, but especially my home people, were able to get some of the same resources that that Jackson, Mississippi, or metropolitan areas were receiving. And my heart was here. Yeah. So later I kind of started working somewhere else. And then that's where Kathy and I have been knowing each other for quite some time because we're both part of the Mississippi HIV Planning Council. And, for months, Kathy was like, Cedric, I want to talk to you. Cedric, I want to talk to you. And so finally, we got a chance to speak. We scheduled a meeting, and I went to visit Kathy in Hattiesburg. And it was an emotional visit, yes, because when she spoke to me about wanting to do something here in the Delta and wanting me to spearhead it, I was like, well, Kathy, I don't know at first. I said, because I want to start my own organization there in the Delta. and she said, well, I can do that. I can help you do that. She's an organizational developer. And I was like, okay. So this was in February. And, we were still talking, but, I was like, ooh, I'm ready to get away from Jackson, and not anything bad about Jackson, but I was just ready to get started. And I knew it would take time. And finally Kathy said, okay, Cedric, we found some funds to do what we can do in Mississippi, and I'm sorry, in Greenville, in the Delta area. And we decided, okay, we're gonna do this for at least 2 years. And by then that you should have received the training from me. Kathy helped develop our board, the board of directors. She came down and did some training with them. We met at least once a month, if I'm not mistaken. Either I went to Hattiesburg or she came to Greenville. And basically she opened up her organization and showed me how it was being operated. Wow. She shared her bylaws with myself and the board. She just shared the steps on doing so, and was just there each time while I was continually doing the work, under Kathy. So we called it ASC Peer. Our name originally was CH Peer, so we just called it ASC Peer to keep the peer part of it. So when we got ready to change over, or when, as I would say, I was born or I came out of the incubation, it wasn't much, change in the name.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So. Thank you for that, Kathy. I have to ask you, when you approached Cedric with this idea, why come to him in supporting creating an organization instead of just another program, an AIDS Services Coalition that would reach into rural Mississippi?
Well, as you know, Dafina, in Mississippi, there are very few of us doing the work. And there weren't any agencies that were doing the work that were led by people living the experience. And that's critically important. As you know, throughout the country, nothing about us without us is critical. Mm-hmm. And Cedric, I've known Cedric for years. We have a mutual admiration society, and I'm going to retire one day. And one of the things that I've told people is that in order for me to retire, there have to be more of us doing the work. Mm-hmm. And Cedric and it had been brewing with me for a while, and apparently, I get chills thinking about it, because I remember when Cedric was talking about us meeting. It was electric, because I said, I have this thing in my head. I want to do something in the Delta. And he said, I'm from the Delta. I didn't know. I thought he was from Jackson. So I think that I know as a rural provider that there have to be more of us. And I can't think of anybody else to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Cedric, did you have any hesitations about going into this type of arrangement with Kathy and her organization?
Yes, I did, but it wasn't anything about Kathy and her organization, because I know the work they was doing. It. The hesitant was basically on myself as to, can I do this? And I have to say this because at one point, not with Kathy, with another organization, I asked for a raise because I was doing so much work. And I was told to get an education. So that kind of set me back a little bit. And I'm like, can I really do this work? Do I need to get, the education? And I know education is important. I've tried college so many times. I can learn stuff and I have the lived experience, true enough, but I think I'm more on hands-on learner, because the things that Kathy taught me, I can do this. I'm not saying it's easy, but yeah, it was just a hesitant of, can I really do this? Not wanting to fail.
When did you realize that you could? When did you realize you could do it?
After, I think about 1.5 years under Kathy, I realized that I could. At one point, I think Kathy she was doing too much and she got a little ill. and I was not able to reach her. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to make executive decisions. And then afterwards, it was like everything was okay. And I was like, yeah, I can do this. And it was coming up on the 2-year period. And, I told Kathy, I said, it's time. She didn't want to let me go, but she let me go.
Oh, Kathy, how do you feel that you've benefited as a leader and your organization has benefited from this relationship that you built with CH Peer and with Cedric?
Well, obviously the work is getting done in the Delta, and that's critically important.
Mm-hmm.
I think having, we provide HOPWA, housing opportunities for people with AIDS, for 73 of the 82 counties in Mississippi, including the Delta. And so we had a housing office there, but that was not enough. The Delta needed more. It needed navigation. It needed people to be able to have that lived experience working with folks. So I know that Cedric has taught my staff a lot about the lived experience. We have other people on our staff who are living with HIV, but I think Cedric is so passionate about being able to get the word out especially in the Delta, because it's so hurt. And people with HIV and people who are gay and same gender loving, it's a struggle to be there. And Cedric has made a safe spot, and it's taught us a lot about making sure that we continue to be a safe spot as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'd be curious to know, how did other folks, your board of directors, peers of yours, how did they respond to this idea?
My board has always given me enough rope to hang myself with. I have a fabulous board, very engaged, very aware of the needs, and they also know that I'm very hard-headed. But they were behind it 100%. Cedric said we actually hired him after we got money. We hired him before. Oh. I knew that we had to do this. I didn't tell him we didn't have money to hire him, but it needed to happen. Other CBOs and other leaders, it's been a little bit of a different story. Mississippi, years ago, Harvard did a study on Mississippi and its disparities. And it talked an awful lot about silos. And they interviewed organizations, and we were actually, as an organization, this is several years ago, spotted as one who had no silos. It does not do me any good to be in a silo if someone has a better way to do something than I do. So we have not. There are no other incubators here yet in Mississippi, or the organizations that have. I have challenged them to, and I continue to be hopeful that they will understand that their experience and even their financial capacity is critical to be able to help people do the work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting to hear you talk about the fact that you saw incubating this organization as a way to expand resources, to expand addressing the needs in the community. Are there additional gaps that you see where you think there are more opportunities for incubation in Mississippi? I'd love to hear from either one of you around that.
Well, the answer is yes, because now there are 4 of us. I think that there are always opportunities when you have people who have passion. Cedric, I never, ever wanted him to be forever an ASC employee. We went into this knowing that he was going to be born, and it might be a painful birth. But I would love to be able to help in any way that supports people who are living with HIV into becoming the best that they can be. People in Mississippi still, and around the United States, people who are living with HIV have become better about living with HIV. Mm-hmm. And in Mississippi, many people, especially in the rural areas, think they're dying with HIV.
Yeah.
And the more that we can bring people into the fold, I think the better.
Yeah.
And I just want to add this as far as closing the gap and with us starting this organization, I say us because Kathy definitely have started here in the Delta. We were, not only do you have a Black gay man that's living with HIV that's starting an organization, you have people in the Delta could see me because I'm still out in the community. I really don't like sitting behind the desk, but I'm still out in the community. And those that I've been knowing for a while, encouraging them to do something and do more of. And it was much needed because of the 3 years that I've been here thus far. We have, had some test positive that probably wouldn't have gotten tested had not been from some of the events that we were doing and some of the events that they were coming to. So I think it's and then we're able to reach out to other organizations that's maybe not traditionally serve HIV, but sex education or education period, and getting out to the faith community. So I think that kind of closed some of the gap here in the Delta, and that we benefited from that.
Yeah.
Davina, I think as far as straightforward gaps, we still have significant gaps in the rural areas doing testing. We've got to find a way to do better testing. Yeah. We have to find a way to get people aware of PrEP in the areas outside of Jackson, Hattiesburg, and the coast. The urbanized areas are beginning to really kick in, but the rural areas, you don't even know what PrEP is. Yeah. And so being able to either expand by having Kathy's wellness wagon,
yes,
my retirement job, or actually beginning to incubate those smaller organizations to be able to do that work in those areas.
Yeah. So Kathy, if you had to make a charge to leaders of larger CBOs, leaders in this work who have an opportunity to mentor, because that's really what you've done with Cedric and his organization, what would you say to them? What's one tip you would give them around effectively mentoring an emerging leader like you've done like the work you've done with Cedric?
You have to pick them well. No. I would say that part of it is having fun. Cedric and I, if you're passionate about the work, the things that Cedric and I sat and talked about, we talked about hours and hours. So I think finding someone with common passion is important. And I can't tell you, we're just fortunate. I don't know that this chemistry will ever happen again in the way that it's happened. But I think that it should. And I think that if every executive director could take someone in the community and say, I think you can do this, without ego, then that's part of the problem. Is the ego's got to go. That was more than one thing, but I think it's a package.
It's all good things. And Cedric, last question for you. What one piece of advice would you give to someone who's doing the work on the ground? I think the first I became aware of you was when the movie Deep South came out. How many years ago was that?
That's
long time ago.
Yeah.
You've been doing this work out of your home, just as a part of just your life for years. And now you're running an organization, have a board and all of this infrastructure. What piece of advice would you give to someone who's trying to figure out if this is their path, who are doing the work in their community?
First, I would tell them, don't try to do it by themselves. Actually find somebody, as Cassidy just spoken, that has the passion that they do, to help them to structure the organization that they want. they have to have passion for this and not think of just themselves. A lot of time my thought was, I want to get funding to hire other people like me, not to make my pocket fat, but just to bring other people on and make sure you're in the community, because you got to be able to talk to people. You got to be able to understand. You got to listen. And that goes also with whomever you get to help you establish this organization. You have to listen to what they say and also have them listen to where you want to go. Kathy listened to where I wanted to go and I listened to her. So it can be done. It's a dream. I often pinch myself. I'm like, because coming back to the Delta is really not my first choice, but it can be done. Just keep the hopes, listen, and you got to want it. You can't look at the dollar signs. You got to look at how you're going to help people, period.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you both so much, Cedric and Kathy. Thank you for your great work. We're going to turn this conversation now and talk to funders, because we need funders to support the type of work that you all are doing there in Mississippi. So let's talk with some funders who are on the ground in southern states supporting the work that is happening by emerging leaders and well-established organizations. Hey, y'all. Very excited to have Andres Acosta, Nina Smith Bankhead, and Marvell Terry II here to have this conversation. How inspiring is that, Kathy and Cedric, and what they've done in Mississippi? I'd like to start with you, Marvell, because I think you're familiar with Mississippi and the work that they're doing. Tell us a little bit about your role as a grant maker and why relationships like the one we just heard about are so important.
Awesome. First, thank you so much for this invitation, Zach and Dafina. I'm excited about today because it brings the attention to the South. And I think we've always worked very hard in the South. So thank you so much. I think the importance of the relationship between Kathy and Cedric, the organization as a funder, we've supported as well at Age United in its infancy, is because you have this mentor-mentee relationship and it's not possessive. And oftentimes when you see a mentor-mentee relationship, it becomes very possessive because, listen, the truth of the matter is Cedric is a Black gay man and Kathy is a white woman. And so when we recognize where the funding is going, it is needed in the community, but Kathy has positioned her allyship and privilege to be able to help another organization. Having started an organization myself in Memphis, I think it was instrumental for me and probably would have been more life-changing if I had mentorship, if I had someone, a local ASO in the area to mentor me. Being young and one of the few Black gay men starting their own organizations, that was few and far in between. There was competition, there was rivalry, there was territorial issues. And so what I see in Kathy and Cedric is a paradigm shift that I wish in every city where there's an ASO, that they find a younger organization, a grassroots organization, to not look at them as competitors, but as partners.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I'd love to hear from you, Andres, when you're thinking about this work, and please tell us a bit about the work of the Contigo Fund and tell us how we marry this. So often we hear that, grantees are receiving money specifically for programming, right? And they're telling us we need so much more than that. How does the Contigo Fund support advocacy on top of programming and other infrastructure things that are needed for really transformative work that's led by the community?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me here. The Contigo Fund was actually born out of the Pulse tragedy. And when it happened, we received a lot of outpouring of funds from organizations, from foundations that were outside of our area that were like, oh, this is a need, here's some money. And we had to learn the hard way, like, once this money comes in, we have to make sure that it gets to the people. So we actually made sure that we incorporated participatory grant making into every level of what we do. That way, it would never become the choice of those of us that have worked with the organization for a while, or those of us that have some type of funding power. We have a board that's made up of people on the ground that are doing the work, that are able to look at it and say, yes, this is something we should fund. We also learned about the way that other funders treated us, right? So with these organizations, we had to convince them like, hey, you know, we still matter even if polls happened this many years ago. And that's kind of something that we learned, like having to advocate for ourselves taught us that we shouldn't have to place that burden on the people that are looking for funds. If you come to me and you say, you know, I appreciate the programming, but we need help with unrestricted funds to grow, we shouldn't place the same burden of like, oh, well, why? You know, why do you need this money? And that's really what we've grown and tried to do every single time, and we keep getting better at it. Recently, we just launched our COVID grants again, because when everyone else's attention started to turn away from COVID and it was like, oh, we're kind of reopening, everything's good, we had to make sure that, one, people were still covered because this pandemic isn't over. And two, we had to make them as low barrier as possible. Part of that was adding a micro grant where literally you're just telling us what you want to do, and we're doing a tight turnaround on that money, because sometimes you don't have the luxury of being able to convince people that what you do matters. You know that it matters, and we should believe you because you're the one doing the work.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for that. And it's really important. You know, we talk about how some things are a moment and some things are a movement. And, you know, recognizing the Pulse tragedy definitely launched a movement in this work. And so it continues. So I appreciate you naming that and all the work that you're doing. Nina Smith Bankhead, would love to hear from you, specifically with the Gilead Compass Initiative. We know that, you know, you there at Emory are doing a lot of work focused around organizational capacity. So if you could talk a little bit about the work that you all are doing there at Emory, and then more specifically, what are some of the needs you're seeing in emerging organizations that you all are doing capacity building work with?
Right. So again, like everyone else, I just want to thank you so much for inviting me and for hosting this panel. I think this is an excellent discussion. And I also just want to shout out Cedric and Kathy. They are the epitome of some of the things that we actually try to bring forth from the Emory Compass Coordinating Center, which is that mentor-mentee kind of teaching relationship. So I really love everything that they talked about, and those relationships are so key. So what we do at the Emory Coordinating Center, our primary focus is organizational development, organizational capacity building. And so most of our focus is on providing, you know, of course we provide grants, but we provide support to organizations that are what we call emerging organizations that are still trying to shore up their infrastructure and help lead to sustainability. And so most of our, you know, sometimes I like to break it down and say we try to help people focus on the things that keep them out of jail and keep the lights on, you know, make sure they can manage their funds, manage their programs effectively the way they're intended, but also help them keep the organization afloat, make sure that the organization exists. And so without, you know, strong organizations, a lot of the services that are provided wane, you know, they come and go. And so we really try to ensure that there are sustainable organizations in community that are able to serve their communities on a longer term basis and not just short term. And so, you know, I guess in terms of the needs, we see everything from board development. One of the things that we actually see a lot of organizations really struggling to make sure that their mission is truly their mission, you know, making sure that what they say they want to do is articulated in a way that is clear to communicate to funders, clear to communicate to their communities, and for their staff, you know, to make sure everyone's in the same direction or doing the same thing. So we do a lot of work with people on really honing in on their mission. We do a lot of work with board development. We just had a training last week, actually, where I spoke to one of our classes about their board. And I was really excited to hear some of the questions and some of the needs that people had, everything from seeking the right board members to filling the right board seats to making sure there's a diverse makeup on their board. So that's another thing. And of course, we always hear about fundraising. And so we always hear about development and fundraising, and then how to manage those funds once they come in. And so, we've brought in and identified some accountants and some development people that are really good at thinking about not just fundraising from grants, but fundraising in other ways. And so, so we pretty much see the gamut. We do an assessment of organizations, and we look at everything on that assessment, from how they engage in community to internal infrastructure issues, how they partner in community, just a number of things. And we try to bring in experts or either our staff try to work with organizations. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think all of us, including Southern AIDS Coalition, are what you call intermediary funders, right? We're all within the umbrella of the Gilead Compass Initiative, doing grant making in our communities. And I'd love for any of you to share from your perspective and in your experience, what makes the role of an intermediary funder so special and so well equipped to address the needs of emerging organizations?
I think for me, as Nina, Mrs. Bankhead was talking, what popped in my head is that being in the middle, we're not a federal grant making institution. We're not CDC. And so what makes grant making for me worthwhile and fun to do is that we get to choose innovative grants and opportunities. We get an opportunity to give more general operating funds. People don't understand to run the project is one thing, but you still got to pay for the building or the infrastructure or the phone at the house or the testing and all of that, those things. I think we have lost our ability to dream and to imagine in our grant opportunities. As a funder, I've seen people copy and paste what they put in a federal grant and give it to me as a funder. And I'm like, this language is just so stiff. Where in the South we are, I talk about salt and sugar in the grits. I talk about moving to the beat of your own drum, homecomings at HBCUs. What is the beat of the drum in your work that you do? And so the exciting part that I get to do is really read innovative proposals. And if they are not innovative, give that constructive feedback in hopes that they apply at Emory or the Contigo Fund or SAC or some other opportunity where they do move through the next process.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, no, I was gonna say I completely agree. I think one of the most important things that intermediary funders actually get to do is we get to start the process of decolonizing philanthropy, right? We're closer to the ground than they are, so we get to choose our staff and make sure that there are people that are involved in the community, but that also haven't completely lost touch from it. And I think one of the most exciting things that we've been able to do is when we fund, especially work around HIV, yes, we'll fund you if you're a good organization that's trying to do something different, absolutely. But we can also fund you in different ways. So we've actually been able to earmark funds that were not meant just for HIV organizations that had to do with HIV. Because there's a lot of organizations that have access to people that HIV organizations don't. And if you don't give them just a little bit of money to get started on like the education piece, the outreach, then you just reinforce those silos. And the only way we were able to really look at that was by having people in our advisory board, or even when Contigo brought me on, I was working for the HIV Planning Council. So I could tell you all about the bureaucracy behind it and like the rage that comes from seeing how bureaucracy almost blocks progress. And then be able to say like, hey, if we just gave this much money to other organizations to start like disrupting the process of HIV, that's great. And you know what? We have nothing to lose because we're not an established like HIV funder. And that's really the excitement, is that piece that you get to bring out the flavor, but you also get to make real positive disruptions in the system. You know?
Absolutely. Speaking of disruption, and I don't know, Nina, were you trying to jump in on that one?
Yeah, go ahead. You could go right ahead.
Andres just got me on a whole nother thing I want to ask you all about, because speaking of the bureaucracy, we hear from a lot of smaller organizations where they feel like they get tapped out, where the larger organization may get the funding from the health department, may get the big dollars, but then are reaching out to smaller organizations to actually get those numbers, right? And so what role do funders have in making sure that organizations are accountable and that our smaller grassroots organizations that are right there in that heartbeat of the community that Marvell was speaking to, that they're getting their fair share and getting the resources to sustain their work? How do we as funders create some accountability around that?
I mean, I could go first. For me, I think one around accountability is I have to be accountable to my funders. I have to be accountable and be a good steward of the resources that I have. So for me, being a good steward of the resources that I have is not funding the same organization more than 3 years. We are there to help you build you up. And after 3 years, if you're bringing in over $250,000 or something in the millions, where's that small organization in your city? You're up and can be competitive with federal and CDC grants or long 5-year grants. Where is that community-based organization? And so for me, my goal is to often not to discount the ASOs that are in the city, because we often find that in some cities, all they have is an ASO. But in other cities, you have 2 or 3 populations or organizations that the ASO will mention, but they will not mention as in partnership. What does that partnership looks like? What does it sound like? You know, what, and then oftentimes the smaller organizations will let you know in the interview process or however you do the application process that this organization ain't working with us. They're just coming to get our numbers. And so it is really a politics that you have to play, and you have to be unbiased. But for me, being a good steward, the decisions that I have to make is that I can no longer fund large organizations with millions of dollars. My goal is to build the infrastructure and the capacity of smaller grassroots organizations that see the people every single day.
Exactly. I love that, Marvell. And thank you for lifting that up. And I think one of the things that we also do to, in terms of accountability, is also to try to encourage in our RFP. Actually, we encourage in our RFP partnerships, and we look at how organizations are budgeting their funds. And so we look at, if you say you're partnering with 3 organizations, who's getting what dollars? You know, how much of the money is going to those smaller organizations, and how much as the lead organization are you intending to hold on to? And so I think that's another way that we try to look at holding the organizations accountable to what they say they're going to do in community with some of their partner organizations. I also just wanted to, one of the things that I think is a benefit from the previous question is just our ability to be flexible. And I think with our funds, Compass, as well as AIDS United and Contigo Fund, I think we have the luxury of not being a federal entity, so that we can actually have some flexibility. And so with that flexibility, we can offer training and technical assistance along with the grant submission. We have oftentimes multiple ways that we can support organizations. So not just giving funds, but giving training with the funds. So not, you know, so this time you may only get $20,000, but we can help you to strive for that $100,000 grant or that $150,000 grant at a later point to help you, you know, build your capacity to gain more funds. So I think that flexibility is also really a benefit for many of us. And we just appreciate being able to work with organizations in that way.
Absolutely. I agree on so many of the points. I think one of the ones that really came to us is like, yes, we absolutely do have to be accountable to the people that are funding us, but we also have to be accountable to the community. So when we start getting feedback that, you know, this larger organization is either using my population only as a token image so they can get more business, then that means that we have to deep into that and say like, okay, if they're only tokenizing parts of our LGBTQ communities of color only to get more numbers, then are we going to fund these people? The other piece is also teaching organizations that advocacy piece within one another so we can actually build a coalition, because alone, we're all small grassroots organizations. Together, we have an actual powerful network. And those bigger organizations, they need us. Because after a certain point, you get too big where it's like you're doing great work. Of course, you're providing treatment, but you're not doing the same thing we are. And when we learn our power and our value and really build that coalition, then the grassroots organizations are also empowered to fight that injustice on their own. To the training piece, one of the most important things is the capacity building, especially around something as basic as an MOU. Understanding that if I'm going to enter with you into business, like I have to protect myself too, even though it's all based on the fact that we want to end the epidemic. It's like I have to do it, but I have to advocate for myself. Because if I can't advocate for myself as an organization, how can I go to the people that I serve and be like, advocate for yourself in the system of care?
And Dafina, I think when we also look at disrupting the status quo or disrupting philanthropic spaces, what I've started doing at AIDS United through the Southern HIV Impact Fund is asking for a representation table. It is not scored on your grant just yet. I'm hoping to get there. But if you're proposing a program for Black gay men and there are no Black gay men in leadership and there are no Black gay men on your board, we got a problem. You know, and I can give you technical assistance, but I can't give you funding. If you have a board of you're trying to do work with Black trans people or Latinx community, and that is not represented on your board or in your leadership, those are some red flags for me. Mm-hmm. And historically, you've been able to get away without a challenging of your board or challenging of your executive leadership. We know that there are people in the community that can be leaders, that can be on your board, and organizations, I think, have become so used to being funded and not being challenged around their board or executive leadership.
Yeah. Oh, this is good. I'm gonna throw a question at you all that I didn't prep you for, but this conversation has made me want to do this. So there are so many people who are doing amazing work, who are trying to decide whether they're an organization. I think we've talked about this, like, am I a program or am I an organization, and trying to make that distinction. What is a question you would recommend a person ask themselves or a group ask themselves as they're trying to make decisions around their structure, whether they're ready to apply for a grant or are we ready to formalize what we're doing here in our community? What's a question they should ask themselves in that process?
Yeah.
I'll let you go first, Nina.
I'm sorry. You know, it's so funny, definitely. We have this conversation often with folks. We have this conversation within our organization, within the Emory Center, as well as with some of our partners. And one of the questions that I've asked a number of people who have started organizations is, are you ready to run a business? Because I think one of the things that we all want to do good. Many of our organizations started from the passion and either a personal experience or some sort of passion for this work or for the people, for our communities. But I think what sometimes isn't clarified within individuals, or they're not able to, similar to Cedric and Kathy's story, they don't have that mentor to sort of show them what it means to run an organization. They don't get to have that mentorship, and they don't get to see what it means to be accountable for your funds. They don't see what it means to be responsible for audits and all of the other things that go along with being a business, being an organization. So my first question is always, are you ready to run a business, or do you just want to do good? Because if you want to do good, I can tell you 5 other ways that you can do good and not have to deal with the burden of all those other things and still get money to support your good deed. Mm-hmm. But if you want to and think you have the capacity to run a business or run an organization, here are the things that we're going to need to talk about to help you get there. So those are the questions I typically ask.
Those are good. Okay, Andres, what you got?
No, so Nina actually hit on the first point, because you do. First thing is always capacity. Like, am I able to run this successfully? So I'll hit on the second point, which is agency, right? Contigo recently had to do that, where we were originally, because we were funded in an emergency kind of response way, we were under a fiscal sponsor where we were really considered a program rather than like our own entity. And at some point, agency became the driving force, because when we wanted to create a fund that was exclusively for Black-led LGBTQ organizations, and we had to go to too many barriers to be able to execute the vision, at that point it was like, we have to move on. Mm-hmm. So it's okay to start as a program, especially if you don't have the capacity. And at some point, you have to start measuring your mission and the agency piece. And if in some way I'm losing out on being able to truly create the change that I want, then at that point, the agency overpowers everything else. I have to have agency over my work, and I have to be able to have agency over the change that I want to create.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
The only additional thing I would say that I do with organizations or initiatives that think they should become an organization is ask them, what is the end game for you? What does the end of this look like for you? And when you look at the end, do you see yourself a part, or do you not see yourself a part of this initiative, this organization? That's one way to look at it. And then another way that I often look at it is really sitting down and tell them, are you wanting to become an organization because of the chatter in the community, because of the putting you on a pedestal? Are you listening to the community, or is that something that you feel? I'm an emotional leader, and I recognize that. And so oftentimes when I sit down from the perspective of that 24-year-old that started his own organization, and the audits and the board and the friendships that were dismissed and the people that walked out of my life and the revolving door and the sacrifices that one has to make. Is this what you're signing up for, or you just want to do good and have fun? And so those are some of the things that I put before people. Because in doing good, if you want to become an organization, it is not always pretty.
That's right. Whew, thank you all so much. I am so glad that y'all are out here disrupting philanthropy and doing this work. And now we're going to talk to some organizations that have answered all of those questions for themselves. So thank you all so much, Andres, Nina, and Marvell. And last but certainly not least, we want to hear from folks who are doing this work. These are leaders in their communities who have started organizations and sustaining great work. It's good to see y'all. Thank you so much for joining us. So I don't even know where to begin. There is such a wealth on this screen right now, and you each do such tremendous work. So let's start by hearing a little bit. Tell us about your organization. Tell us how you got started. And I'm going to start with Ariana.
Thank you so much, Dafina. I am so happy to celebrate 20, get the HIV specific in the South, the impact, how the South, and also I am Ariana Lynn. My pronoun is she, her, hers, ella en español. I am so proud to be a Latinx transgender, open in HIV. I'm living in the South. Right now I am in Puerto Rico. We have an office in South Florida where we take care of the whole South, specific for transgender individuals and advocacy, and give the different ways and different support to get better quality of life. And also we have 2 offices in Puerto Rico. This week we're going to have an amazing week in Puerto Rico about the leadership and break the stigma with the HIV. I am so happy. Last week, I'm celebrating my 6th anniversary of my organization. And let me tell you something. I'm start my organization with the scratch, with no pennies. People, they don't believe in me because they think, yes, I am a transgender, and I don't going to do impact. But I believe in me. I believe in the second chance of the HIV give us. And I believe in the leadership of the transgender individuals in the South. And now, after 6 years, I am so happy to have amazing founders who believe in my work, who believe in the impact what we're doing and the amazing in the South, as a AIDS United, as a Gilead, as a Southern AIDS Coalition, and everything. We are so happy, but I think we have to looking for more and for for more things. I am so happy in this year, in this month also, we have finally one transgender African of color in the Pacha as a Pacha member, who is my best friend, Tori Cooper, and I'm celebrating her. And I think not just have to be only her and the Pacha, but I need a voice of the no-binary people, the trans Latinx community, and also the trans men to get the most visibility and equity. So I am so happy to be partner of the Southern AIDS Coalition, and let's meet the other guests.
You're a natural. You should be a game show host, Ariana. Thank you so much, and thank you for everything that you do. Next, we'll go to Ms. Pat Kelly.
Hello, everyone. Happy Southern HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. And living in the South, that is just really a wonderful thing to be able to say, you know, because we need to bring awareness here in the South about HIV and AIDS. And so I'm Pat Kelly. I'm the Executive Director of Family Affair, Living Our Best Life in Orangeburg, South Carolina, where I serve Black women living with HIV with a focus of those over the age of 50 in the rural South. And so we're in Orangeburg, Bamberg, and Calhoun counties. And being in the rural South, sometimes we get forgotten, you know, by the largest cities and the bigger places around. We hear about things that happen in the afterwards. But right now, I'm very happy that I can be here to help serve my women and see them empowered in Orangeburg, South Carolina.
And we're so glad you're in Orangeburg, South Carolina. Thank you so much. Last but certainly not least, Mackenzie.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate your having me on today. I really appreciate it, Tafina. Thanks so much to SAC. Thanks so much to everyone. And thanks to Ariana's energy level. very, very rarely am I like, wow, I might not be the most energetic person in this room, but I think she's probably got me by a couple factors. My name is Mackenzie Copley. I help lead an organization that I co-founded a few years ago in Washington, D.C. called 1/10 Health. What we do is we set up 10 by 10 canvas tents outside of grocery stores, laundromats, convenience stores, just places where people already are. And we offer free, fast HIV screening in just about 15 minutes or less. We do it with the help of a large college student volunteer base. A few years ago when we started, we had I remember training our first 12 volunteers in a classroom in a school across town. And today we're up over 2,300 students from 5 schools here, including Howard, Georgetown, GW, Maryland, and American University as well. We've tacked on a bunch of services to our events. We started out just doing the HIV screening, and we've been really happy. Our positivity rate is about twice the city's average. So I think just bringing the services directly to where people are is super helpful. But so since COVID came, we tacked on COVID testing. So now when somebody comes to an event, we're in parks now. While they're waiting in line to get COVID tested, they can get registered to vote. While they're in line, they'll get their COVID test. Right afterwards, we talk to everyone about Narcan. We partner with an organization that can give people Narcan right there. And then afterwards, if they want to get an HIV screen, they can do that. And for the people who it's appropriate for, we can set them up. We made a partnership with a local clinic, and we can set people up with PrEP and actually give them a sample pack with about 7 days right then and there, and set them up with an appointment so they can get a full prescription within the week. So that's kind of where we started, where we're at, and we'll see where it goes. But just really grateful to be here and to do this work too. So thank you.
Wow, thank you. You all are so impressive in doing such tremendous work. And Mackenzie, I'm gonna start with you with this question. When did you know it was time to start an organization? Like, when did that light bulb go off and you were ready to hit the ground running to do it?
Yeah, right. That's a good question. Certainly a lot of thoughts are probably flowing through all of our minds after seeing that last the last segment of the panel go. But so it kind of went in phases, like little steps. up as we went. There was like the decision to start the organization, and then there was the decision to quit my full-time job and start working on it full-time, which I think are the two big ones for me. The decision to start it came back when I was 21. I'm 28 now. We're all living in bubbles, so I lose sense of age and time in these things. So maybe I'm representative of the youth contingent here, although it doesn't really feel like it, especially with a bit of a beard growing right now. But so I started the organization when I was a senior in school, in college nearby here in DC. Pretty much how it happened was I went and got HIV screened one of my first times, and I was just feeling really nervous about the test, and I thought, other people must be feeling the same way, if not even worse. And so I asked if I could, I think like while I had like a needle in my arm, I asked if they had any volunteer opportunities. And so the nurse kind of looked up at me like, I guess. And she went and spoke to the doc, and he said, yeah. And so a week later, I actually found myself skipping my Calc 3 class and being across town out in front of a grocery store doing HIV screening, kind of similar to what we do now. And I loved it. It was for sure a good use of time. It felt really good. I just got to help people, I kind of put that desire into action, which I think always feels good. And but what happened was about a week into it, or a few weeks into it, I saw that we were testing a bunch of people every day, but a bunch of people are getting turned away and needing to leave after waiting in line and without having gotten tested. And it seemed weird. And so I asked why they were getting turned away. And the nurse told me it was because I didn't have insurance. And that just really stuck wrong with me. It didn't feel fair, especially like the people without insurance. You're probably not employed, or you don't have full-time employment, so you're lower income, just all these kind of negative health things that go in with having lower income. It just felt to me like the people without insurance should be the ones who we test first, perhaps. And so I asked the organization, I asked the owner if we could start testing them and the uninsured, and he said, no, we're private for-profit, we can't make any money off of them, so no, we're not going to test them. And so I asked again politely, would it be okay? And he said no. And so at 21, I very politely said, well, screw you. I'm going to go start a nonprofit and test everyone for free. And about a week later, I found myself in a Starbucks on M Street here in town, Googling bylaw, nonprofit bylaw template, and kind of just kicking it off from there. So it happened pretty quickly, but that's kind of how it kicked off. And I had no idea. We talk about program versus organization. I had no idea that this would become my full-time job. But I'm so grateful that I get to spend my time this way.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy that it went the way it did.
Well, we are too. And so thank you so much for that. Ariana, the same question for you. When did you decide that it was time to start Ariana Center?
Dafina, you asked me for one very personal question, because actually I do it by myself. I was working for many years organizations where they are management by gay or lesbian people, and I'm never growing up. I was applying. I want to be a supervisor. I just want to have a little more up position. That is what anyone in the United States decide. I think because I was with my transgender gender identity very out there, people, they don't believe in my talents or what I think. But also, I look in and I say, I can do it by myself. I can do it by myself. These people, they need the girls. Hello, I have the girls. So no problem. So when I show the group of the people, of the transgender amazing people I have, people, they're going to interesting and have and believe in my work and my service. 2 years ago, thanks to AIDS United, I have one grant so I can hiring more people and the executive level, and they give me the professionalism, the the academic thing, maybe people they don't think I have because I am a Latina, or because I don't my English is with a lot of accent. But these people, they're going to working together as a team, and we take Ariana Center as the other level. As I told you, right now we have a 2 office in Puerto Rico. We serve in the whole South. We have an office in Miami. We're doing amazing historical things. We bring more of 25 transgender openly living with HIV to Tallahassee before the COVID, and talking when official elected, when the Senator Jan Piso to talking about HIV criminalization in Florida and how affect transgender women of color, a transgender. So for me, it was so happy. I just opened Ariana Center to demonstrate I have a talent.
Yes.
And I now I am so happy. Like people trust me, people believe in the work, and the most amazing thing, I'm not lose my girls. I have a lot of transgender. Right now we have a trans men program. We hiring transgender people in Puerto Rico and Florida. So what I did, I am so proud about that. I am so proud. I cannot believe, really, I cannot believe where I am right now. But I'm so happy where I am, and I am so happy of the support of my advocacy, You Equal You, the Well Project, everything, any tools they can help me to break the stigma and educate my community to get a better quality of life.
Yes. Thank you. Miss Pat, would love to hear from you how it came to be when you know it was time for you to start an organization on your own. What need existed in your community? And I think you're muted.
Wow, that's a big one. I relocated from New York to South Carolina, Orangeburg, the rural area where I was first diagnosed. I was diagnosed in South Carolina 37 years ago. And when I came back to South Carolina, I had seen that things had not changed much from the day that I saw people going to the doctor and looking at death in the basement. And I was like, when I went to the clinic, I was like, no. I did not come here to start that negativity stuff all over again. So I realized I had to do something positive to keep my life moving forward. And I started a support group. That's how I started a support group at the church. The church opened the doors to allow me to have my support group there. And then I realized that there was an organization already at the church, the Minority AIDS Council of Orangeburg, Bamberg, and Calhoun County. And so I did a lot of work under them and the MC Butler Community Development Center. But as years went on, those organizations stopped doing work and dissolved. MC Butler Community Development Center dissolved, and Miss James from the Minority AIDS Council got sick. And so once that happened, I had to start the organization, even though I was very hesitant, because in the beginning I had seen the vision and knew that was something I had to do, but I was being a stubborn child and I didn't want to do it. And then when so many other things happened, I had no other choice because there was a need for women. Well, I started out a support group for everybody, for the families of people living with HIV who did not have that in communities. So support groups are normally just for the people that go to the clinic. So I had a children of support group. I had a family. Everybody could come and talk about what was going on because I saw that as a need. And there were so many other needs that we had that the AIDS Service Organization, that was our medical clinic, could not give us. We are more than a pill. We needed more than a pill. And so as I looked at what we needed, I knew that we had to be the ones to do this for ourselves. And so with Miss James getting sick and Minority AIDS Council not being able to move forward, I knew it was time. I mean, and this, for me, I'm in my I'm 67 years old. I'm not supposed to be doing work now. I'm supposed to be living my best life. But I'm living my best life under the organization that is helping other Black people, other Black women to be empowered to live their best life, because we're not dying, we're thriving, we're surviving, and we got to show who we are in all our best. And I see that A Family Affair is here to do that for us women in the rural South. I mean, because we refuse to be forgotten, and we refuse to be an afterthought. And that's why I had to start the organization.
Amen. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much. You're getting snaps and claps and all of it. I want to ask you, I'd love to hear how have you seen the bold step that you've taken in starting an organization empower people in your circle? I know Mackenzie has volunteers, and Ariana talks about the ladies, and Pat and the support groups. How have you seen the steps you've taken empower and inspire other people in your community? Anyone can answer that.
I'll start. I see it empowered to the fact that with funding, we've been able to hire a program manager, and the elevation of herself. The majority of, we're all women. Our staff is all women living with HIV. Our board is more than half of women living with HIV. We know what our needs are. So we are the ones that provide what we need. And the elevation is of women living in the country, being able to have a tablet and get on these meetings. You know, they're like, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for connecting me. Thank you for giving me my family, you know. And I mean, these are people that have been diagnosed in the 20s, you know, over 20 years ago. But the light is just coming on because they can see we love each other. We care for each other, you know, and we are not going to leave anybody by the wayside. You know, we are carrying everybody that wants to come along. We try to partner with the AIDS service organization to give us people so that we can elevate them. You know, my staff member said it's all about elevation. We're moving up. We're elevating. So we want to elevate all Black women living with HIV in this rural South to know you are loved, you have a life, you are powerful, and we help to get you where you want to go.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Ariana, any thoughts? What type of empowerment are you seeing in your work?
I love to empower the transgender community, specific when we advocate and give the whole resources and the whole things to get a better life, right? Better career. Right now, we are working and we believe in emerging leaders in different states. And we're going to start, well, we already started last week of the listening circles, where is the emerging leaders convoke and groups to talking about the issues and maybe what is the local issues of each one, and working together and give the resources to helping. As example, in Atlanta, maybe they don't have a data, and we expert and create data for the transgender community. We have studies with data in Fort Lauderdale, in Puerto Rico. So that is what kind of things to helping to growing up, give the resources to hold transgender to get, and also working together with other translate organizations. And for South Florida, we're working very close with Trans Inclusive and also Transsocial. And over here in Puerto Rico, we specific focus in aging transgender individuals. So we partner with Sage Ahead, and we have a program for transgender over 50 and openly living with HIV also. And also we have a group of trans men, the first program exclusive for trans men, and management by one trans man who we are hiring. So we are happy to help in like that and empower the transgender.
Yes, that's wonderful. Mackenzie, I'm sure there's a ripple effect happening when you have such a large contingent of volunteers. So talk a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, totally. So a lot of our empowerment, I think, is done through the youth. We're still a pretty low budget organization, so like our days of being able to hire, just employ a whole slew of Black executives are ahead of us, and not at the present moment. But it's certainly something that like would be incredible to be able to do. But so as far as empowerment goes, it's a lot of youth empowerment. So much of what happens, we're a very small staff. So much of what happens is done through our volunteer corps. We have about 3 students who just entirely run 110 Health, recruitment, volunteer training, and volunteer management at each of their schools. We rotate those students every year. So it's about 50 students now who have been able to do that, train their peers on how to help the community, how to get out there, do the best that they can. And then beyond just youth empowerment, with this past year, having started COVID testing, we actually were able to, for the first time in our organization's life, make money for what we're doing, as opposed to just being like totally reliant on grants, which certainly help. But there's nothing like just being able to get paid for what you do. There's a lot of freedom in that, and so kind of with that and with that contract, the COVID testing contract that we got requires 3 testing events a week. We do it on Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. The 2 weekend events, we have more than enough volunteers to staff. But so that weekday event, how did we want to fill it? And what we decided to do is, because we didn't think we could rely on the volunteer corps, especially in the summertime, for weekday events. They have like summer classes or internships, things like that. We realized that we had the opportunity to bring on a paid team, and a paid part-time team. And so with that opportunity, thinking about like, what was the best thing that we can do with that money? Like, what's the most good that we can do with it? We looked at that hiring opportunity as an opportunity to just do more good. And so what we decided to do was bring on, the aspiration, and what we got to execute on was to bring on an all-Black team from the community, a paid team. Minimum wage here is $15 an hour. We've decided to pay $25 an hour. We're like not messing around. My friend said one time, it's one thing to go and help the neighborhoods. It's another thing to employ them. And so kind of trying to live by that. And so it's an all-Black team from the neighborhoods, from the community. And then we also wanted to make sure that it's filled with majority returning citizens, or people who are worried about making their rent. Just thinking about like people who are just out of prison, like as far as I'm concerned, they've served their time. They've sat in timeout. Like once they get out of timeout, they're supposed to be free, but they can continue to get discriminated against in the labor market. So, so that's just like the group that we wanted to try to bring in. I thought it would be like kind of the nicest thing for us to do. And I'm grateful that we've been able to execute on it and bring the team in. And it's so wonderful, like having them like just there with us too, because I think it just like entrenches us even more deeply in the community, creates like a legitimate connection. All these benefits, like both for us, but also for them, and it's mutual. And I'm just really, it's one of my favorite things that we do. So I'm really proud to get to do it.
It's wonderful, and there's definitely a theme with all 3 of you talking about providing opportunity who are otherwise not getting those opportunities. So that's such a unique role that organizations that are community-led, who have seen what the needs are on the ground in your communities, providing those opportunities. So I'd love to hear from you. What do you need from funders? If you had an opportunity to sit in front of the funder with the blank check and say, this is what my community needs, this is what we need. So not a dollar amount, as much as what is it that, what do you need? What support is needed to sustain this amazing and powerful work that you're doing with your communities?
I would like to start that. I think that what we need from funders is an opportunity to be able to tell our story about the work that we're doing, without the dollar amount, and the impact that it has in our community, how it affects the people we serve. Mm-hmm. I think that telling that story is profound in itself, but also we need an opportunity to be able to not be on the same playing field as those people them high organizations way up here that have the money to buy a grant writer, we need to be able to tell our story and get it acknowledged in how we do the work in the community.
Thank you so much for that. Absolutely. Anybody else?
I think locally, I follow what Contigo Found made in Orlando, specific grants and mini grants for regional cities and for especially cities. We are in Fort Lauderdale and Miami, the first and the second place in new infection and new diagnostic of HIV nationwide, and we don't have organization, or maybe we have, but they are no cultural competence. As at Marvel comment, they want to make a transgender program, but they don't have any transgender to develop in the program or decide or make a choice, just to put one transgender to cover and say. So I think maybe that kind of thing, and invest in the trans-led organization, invest in African American organization and grassroots organization, because really that is what we can do. Connecting with all founders, because actually, I cannot say nothing to Southern Aid Coalition, to AIDS United, because they already granting us and funded us, but maybe they have other connection with other founders. They can help us and give them more resources. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mackenzie, what would you say to the funders?
Yeah. Thank you. First. We're the beneficiary of a bunch of fantastic funders, sorry. Gilead, AHF, different ones, different big ones, smaller ones, more locally. I really like the local ones. We have some really good ones. The Community Health Foundation up here is really fantastic. What would I say? Things that would be helpful. Unrestricted funds, I think, are fantastically helpful. The needs that you project having 6 months ago when you wrote the grant change as things come up, and small things come up, like the U-Haul that you move all the stuff around. It needs gas. Oh, but we have a bunch of money in the bank, but we can't spend a cent on getting ourselves to the event. And I think perhaps hyper accurate budgeting could make up for that, but also just new costs pop up as time goes on, new needs, and especially if I think everybody wants all organizations to be responsive to needs, right? Well, not all needs, every need that will be doesn't exist right now, and so having some wiggle room there, I think, would be really valuable for us, and would continue to be. And then just an idea right off the top of the head, thinking about this, big orgs, small orgs, things like that. It might be really helpful if there was money set aside in each funder's bucket for not only first-time applicants, but maybe more importantly, young organizations. I'm not talking about the age of the leadership, but just the year since inception, and then also the size of the budget too, because I think there's the large organizations can probably push huge volume, but as far as getting into the nooks and crannies of neighborhoods, of societies, different things like that, I think that's where smaller organizations can really bring value and benefit. And so it might not be the highest volume, but the need of the individuals who you find in those pockets is super high. Can be really great. And I think making sure that they get served and making sure that organizations are there to serve them are both really important.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I feel like we could go on for another 30 minutes because there's so many more questions I want to ask. So I hope that you all will commit to doing a part 2 of this conversation with us, and would love to bring all of our guests back on screen for a moment. All right, this has been a rich discussion, and it has been so great to hear these different perspectives. So before we close out, I want to provide an opportunity for any final thoughts or any question that's burning for any of you who have been listening to the other guests during this time.
if I may. Listening to this conversation, it was really powerful because I work with Contigo and I'm super proud of what we get to do. I also run my own program with the Maven Leadership Collective called Linkages and Lasses, and it's all around empowering non-HIV organizations and how to meaningfully include people living with HIV in their work. So hearing what the other organizations that are, doing the work and are fighting for funding had to say, I'm totally there. Like, I get you. I know what it means to be part of an ally like Contigo. And I also know what it means to reach out to bigger organizations and say, here's my impact. It still matters. And I just want to let you know that from that aspect of my work, I understand what it means to hear no. And I just want to say the things that we're all doing are important. Every no that we get just makes us learn and fight twice as hard because it's a never-ending battle. And I'm really grateful that I was able to be a part of this panel. It's amazing work, all of you.
Yeah, I would like to just jump in and congratulate those of you who are doing the work. I mean, I'm really excited to see some of your organizations I've had the pleasure of working with, and I'm just so impressed with how your organizations have grown and are continuing to serve the community. So I just want to congratulate all of you on all the great work that you're doing in community. So thank you for that.
And I just want to thank and listening to Ariana, Pat, and Mackenzie, and being a young organization and they still sustaining. I will be my own entity. Well, I was born October 1st, so I'm finna be a year old, and it's been wonderful. The success thus far. Kathy hadn't gone anywhere. She's still there. She still calls, and we still talk. And she's coming for a visit soon. So just to hear you guys talk and see the passion that you all had for the work, which will, I know it's going to keep me going. And, I started off with a staff of one, myself and one other person. Now I have 3 staff members and, they're all live with lived experience. These words change so much, so I have to get it right. And, one of them is a older woman who's actually 66 years old who do the work. And she was volunteering with me for a long time. So just to hear you guys is just know that, hey, just keep doing the right thing. And of course, I would have to thank Emory as well as Ace United for the support that they have given in this past year. And it's just hard to believe it's going to be a year, but yeah.
Thank you all so much. There were so many powerful themes that came out of these conversations, the necessity of mentorship, determining what data matters. We heard you, Ms. Pat, talking about the value of the story and that funders need to fund and listen to the story. We didn't get to talk about fiscal sponsorship, but I think that's another piece we've got to talk about. Yeah. We want to talk about the success of our emerging organizations and how we ensure that. Providing opportunities for first-time applicants, young organizations, meaning new organizations with smaller budgets, making sure that we're earmarking dollars to support that work. There are so many different strategies that are available to us to build and to sustain organizations that are community-led and empowering our communities. So thank each of you so much for your role in doing that. And thank you for joining us for this conversation for Southern HIV/AIDS Awareness Day 2021. And we will be following up and doing a 2.0 version of this because there's still much to discuss. So thank you so much to all of our guests. We appreciate each of you, and please continue the work and we will get there together. Thank you.